Hello and welcome to Lynchburg Live. I'm your host, Linda Smith. Last year, Dr. William Andrews was my guest telling us about his annual pediatric orthopedic surgical mission in Mexico, Kids First. Dr. Andrews is my guest again tonight and will be telling us about the necessary support trips he makes that surround the actual surgical trip. Dr. Andrews, welcome back to Lynchburg Live.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
For the audience who may not know about Kids First, will you just tell them what that is?
Certainly. Kids First is a nonprofit group that we started about 20 years ago, and there are about 23, 24 members. We are nurses, doctors, both surgeons and anesthesiologists, and we do free orthopedic surgical work on children in different countries around the world, mostly South and Central America.
Are you the primary organizer?
I'm the primary organizer, yes.
Yeah. When was your last trip? I know you've had one.
Our last surgical trip was in the beginning of June of this year, and then I went back 6 weeks later and did a post-surgical trip.
Okay. Do you have a date for 2012 yet?
Yes, it's June 9th to the 17th.
How many days are you usually there for the main surgical trip?
The main trip is 10 days, and that's the longest of the trips that we do.
You take a full staff with you. How many people?
The full staff is about 25 people.
And they're from all over the United States?
They are,
really?
all over the U.S.
Okay. Now, you're pretty much exclusively based in San Miguel.
Yes, our team has been going there for about 7 years.
Do you plan on going anyplace else, or is this pretty much where you're going to stay located?
What we've tried to do is to find a place that had the right mix of need and governmental support, and we had that in the country of Colombia for a long time until the guerrillas got too close to where we were working and took our hospital over. So after we lost Colombia, we were looking for another Colombia-type place, and Mexico has become that. We have very good support locally from the hospital. We have very good support from the government, and we also can ship our equipment overland rather than by air, which saves us a lot of money.
I'm sure it does. All right, how are your trips funded, if you don't mind?
No, that's a good question. Our trips are funded basically by ourselves. I write grants, and we probably get about half of our funding from grants. I also am lucky enough that some people have heard about our trip and will donate money on their own. Several of the other surgeons have some connections, and so between us all, we raise the money for each trip.
Before I really want to sort of highlight the other trips that you take that surround this major surgical trip, but before we get started with that, you brought some pictures, and Phil, if you'll put the pictures up on the screen, Dr. Andrews will tell us what they are.
Okay, that first picture is Laura Myers. She's one of our surgeons from St. Louis, and she does nothing but children's orthopedics in St. Louis, and that's one of our scrub nurses who's from Vanderbilt, and they're doing a clubfoot case. The next is just a picture of an attractive young kid. The children are always so pleasant, and the rewards are just being with the children and seeing the looks on their faces. So we take a lot of pictures just of kids, and that's just one of them.
What are the average ages of the kids that you operate on?
The average age, we do a lot of children under the age of 2. We don't go above usually 16 or 17 unless there's an unusual situation. And that's a child in our post-op unit. We have all our own post-op nurses too.
And you have anesthesiologists?
We do. That's one of our post-op nurses there. We have 5 anesthesiologists, and we run 3 rooms, so we always have an extra anesthesiologist in the recovery room, and an extra anesthesiologist getting the next patients ready. And that's just a cute child and her mother after surgery on her right leg. You can see the cast in the bottom there. Another cute kid. We end up taking lots of pictures of the kids. But like I said, that's really one of the joys is getting to know the children. This is the oldest kid we've done in a while. He's 18. He looks like he's 25, but he had a lot of problems with his upper extremities, and we've operated on him, I think, now 3 or 4 times. And we did his right arm this year. You can see the cast on his right side.
He's starting to be like a friend as much as a patient.
He's a frequent flyer with us. That is actually his wrist. He had a disproportionate length of his forearms, and so we rebalanced, or cut both of them and rebalanced the length so that the wrist would work correctly. One of the bones was much longer than the other. And that is actually his intraoperative picture. That's as we're exposing the bone and getting ready to make the cut and shorten the longer bone, which is the bone on that side. This is a child who had a dislocated hip, treated at another center, and it was treated well, but then the hip redislocated, and we did another procedure to put it back in place. This is the waiting area. On Sunday, the first day, we'll see about 300 children and then decide who needs surgery the most and who can wait for another year. And the local Corona factory donates those tents, and a lot of the local people bring food and feed the children and feed their families while they're waiting, because it's a long day. It's easily a 12-hour day.
Corona beer.
There's a big Corona bottling plant in the town where we work. This is one of my favorite little girls. She is not a patient, but her father is a veterinarian, and he's very interested in service and his children being aware of how lucky they are in doing service to others. And so I met her father about 4 or 5 years ago through an unusual situation, and we became friends. And he takes his children around to underprivileged areas of Mexico, and they spay stray dogs. But he got interested in our group, and he brings his 3 daughters, and they translate for us and have become really an important part of the team. They speak incredibly perfect English and Spanish, and they're just great outgoing girls, and that's the middle of the 3.
I bet they look forward to doing that.
They do, and they're great. We really have a good time. This woman is the head of the roughly what would be considered Medicaid in this state, and she's been a big resource to us in terms of record keeping and just organizing the children and getting them to the hospital when we're there and stuff like that. And this is Santiago, who is a lawyer, and he, when we were there, translates all day Sunday, which is at least a 12-hour day, and usually 3 other days. He basically takes the week off, or most of the week off, and translates the whole time. Just a great friend and a great guy.
Great pictures.
Thank you.
They really are. Now, as organizer of this mission trip, how many trips do you make?
I make 3 more trips, so I make 4 trips a year. There's the surgical trip, which is the whole team and the longest. But I will go back 6 to 7 weeks after the surgical trip, take off all the casts, meet with our volunteers, meet with the hospital. That trip takes a week. Then I will go back one other time in the fall or winter, depending on my schedule, and do a pre-op clinic for the next year. There are centers around this state that are so far away that we go to see the children there and bring them in rather than have them all come to San Miguel to be screened. That way, if they don't need surgery, they don't have to come to visit us. And then I have to have another week there when I'm doing another pre-op clinic and also doing all my work with the government. There's a lot of work that has to be done directly with the government in person, a lot of paperwork, a lot of filling out of forms. And between that and all the import licenses we get to bring the equipment in, that makes the 4th trip a year.
Now, the initial trip is when you see the government, is that right? When you line up everything with the government?
One of the trips is that, and some of that you can do by internet and out of the country, but a fair amount of it has to be done in the country. The government changes in Mexico differently than here in that no one can succeed himself or herself. Currently, the mayor is a woman. She's very good, but when she first came in, I had to then go down and meet with her and do all the organizational work, because I need to do my work, her blessing, but she isn't going to give me her blessing unless she knows who I am. So I had to go down and meet with her officials, and then you basically have to walk through the trip in terms of the organization, the things the government is going to help us with, the things the government needs from us, and it's all those kinds of things that I do when I go down there.
So because they have rapidly changing officials, that's the reason that you have to keep doing this annually?
That, and the Mexican government is a very detail-oriented government in terms of anything that crosses the borders of their individual states. And so I have to prepare a really, really long document with everything we're bringing in. And a lot of that has to be approved in person, basically.
Have you ever had any difficulties?
The Mexican government has been very good to work with. We have had some moments once the customs official who was supposed to be at the airport wasn't, and there was another one there, and he wouldn't let our equipment go through. But for the most part, they've been easier than a lot of the other countries we've worked with.
Now, the second trip, I'm looking at it like the government is your first one, because I think you went in February last year, or this year. All right, the second trip is your screening trip, is that correct? All right, and you stay how long?
About a week, because we will go to different places in the state. The state of Guanajuato is the state that San Miguel is centered in. Guanajuato is as big as the state of Virginia. It has something like 5 million children who are listed as disabled. And so all the children we work on do not have the funds to pay for their work, which means that a lot of them don't have transportation. So we will go to a city called Irapuato and screen children there. This time when I was there doing a post-op clinic, we went to Dolores Hidalgo and spoke to them about doing the same next time. So we will go to different areas and screen the children there and then decide which ones we need to operate on, so that less of them have to come to San Miguel when we're there for the surgical trip. They've already been pre-screened.
So they don't come to you?
The trip is organized that they know we're coming.
Okay.
And so that we have in Irapuato, there's a friend whose name is Eugenio de Pavia, and Eugenio basically organizes all the kids, so they know when we're coming. And another surgeon from Nashville, from Vanderbilt, and I go on that trip.
Okay, so just two of you go on that.
Do that.
All right. How difficult is it to try to screen these kids? I mean, I know it must be awful to leave some out.
That's probably the hardest part of what we do. It's very difficult to say no to a child, as we know, being
especially
parents.
A child in need.
And a child in need. Some of them are fairly clear-cut. Some children don't need anything, but just like in this country, their parents are concerned about how their foot looks or their hand looks, and they want to make sure that there's nothing that, if it weren't done soon, would cause a long-term problem. So that's the same kind of concern we see here. So a lot of them don't need anything. But the ones who do, it's hard to turn them down. And what we do, we have computerized records, and so anybody who we think is worthy of an operation but for whom we don't have enough time, we will put at the top of our list the next year. And so they know when we're coming back, and they kind of have a free space for the surgery next year. They don't have to be then compared to the new patients who come in. They're at the top of the list.
I don't know if you've already answered this in what you said, but how close to the actual surgical trip is this screening trip?
About 2 months.
All right, and you see approximately how many children on the screening trip?
On a typical screening trip, we will probably see somewhere around 35 to 50 kids in a place. And anytime we're in San Miguel, we end up screening more children because we've been there enough that our volunteers know when we're coming. So that, you're always having a few more there too.
I can't imagine that you could do this without having these screening trips. I mean, if you tried to do everything on the big surgical trip, that just wouldn't work.
Well, we only have one day to screen on the big trip, and like I said, we'll do 300 children that day, and you really can't see many more than that. This last year, one of our surgeons, Laura Meyer, had a family issue, and she couldn't come until Monday, so 2 of us screened 300 children.
Oh my
And
goodness.
you can't really see any more than that.
I can't imagine. That just sort of blows my mind. How many children did you actually do surgery on in May of this year?
In May of this
Or
year,
June.
we did 142 operations.
And you're pretty much just constantly working every day that you're there.
Yes.
Yep, long days. Okay, following the surgical trip, the big surgical trip, you go back when? 6 weeks, did you say?
6 weeks later.
Okay, and what do you do on that trip?
I do basically a post-op clinic where I see all the children whom we've treated, and take their casts off, take their pins out if they have pins in, change their cast if they need a new cast. There are always other kind of drop-in kids.
Right.
There's some kids that we've operated on before who didn't come to the clinic before. So it's a combination of things.
Do you have, all right, what if a kid has a complication before you go back? Is there somebody that covers these kids or is there to see them?
There is. We have Eugenio De Pavia, who is in Irapuato, will take care of any of our issues there. And in San Miguel, there is a guy named Jorge Fidargas, who's the head of the hospital, and he basically will take care of any of the children. He's not an orthopedist, but he'll take care of any of the children who have an issue. And nowadays, he can call me on the phone, he can email me, he can send me pictures. And luckily, we've had very few complications. But the nice thing is, if there's an issue, they can get in touch with me right away. So there's not this situation where a child we've treated is now without anybody to follow up on the problem.
If you have a complication, and if you go back on this follow-up trip and there is a child with a complication and needs surgery, what do you do? How do you handle that?
We have only, it sounds amazing, but we've only had 2 children in the whole history of Kids First who needed another operation sooner than when we were there.
That's wonderful.
It's lucky, probably more than anything else. But those 2 times, what we have done is gotten another surgeon from another town to do that in his hospital, and we've paid for the surgery. So that was the best way we could figure out how to do it.
Are you the only one who goes back on this follow-up?
Yes.
Okay. And you said so, but I don't remember. How long do you stay?
It's about a week trip.
All right. I know that you have all of your own surgical instrumentation for the big trip.
Yes.
All right. How about supplies? Surgical supplies, sponges?
We ship about 100 to 150 big boxes of those things, surgical supplies, and we ship them overland. We have a barn in Nashville where we pack it all together, and then we have a driver who comes from San Miguel and picks it up in Nashville and drives it back.
Didn't you tell me that on one trip, not in San Miguel, but somewhere else, that your instrumentation, everything was confiscated?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a terrible story.
In Brazil, it was just one of those things that happens sometimes, but they claimed we were in an airport leaving a town called Natal, which is on the coast, and they brought in this woman who they said was the medical director of the airport, and she had just thick dirt under her fingernails, and she slapped on a white coat, but we don't think she's really a doctor. And she looked at all of this is our equipment that we carry on the plane, our surgical
Right.
equipment. And she looked at it all and said, we had bought it in Brazil, and said we had to pay an export tax, basically. And she wanted $20,000, and we negotiated down from there. But it's never happened before, but we've never been back to Brazil either for that reason.
I don't blame you. These are just some general questions I was interested in. What kind of accommodations do you and your team have when you go down for your big surgical trip?
In San Miguel, we've been very lucky. We have stayed in terrible places with crawling and bugs and nasty environments. But San Miguel, the people have been very welcoming, and people have donated their homes So our team stays in 4 different homes, which are very nice. These are nice accommodations, and they're all donated by people in Mexico, in San Miguel, for free.
That's
so
wonderful.
we have no cost for lodging there.
How long have you been doing these trips? I may have asked you that too, but I
About
can't
20
remember.
years.
20 years. All right. Something you said while we were looking at the pictures of the kids. Going to the same place and seeing some of these kids over and over, you're bound to have a special kid that you operate on, or that touches everybody.
You do, and each one of us probably has different favorites. One of the ones that we liked the most was a guy named Wilmar Ortiz, and he had a thing called hypophosphatemic rickets, which basically makes your bones so brittle that they continually break, and your bones become S-shaped, either looking from the side or from the front, and you really can't do anything physically very active. And we did procedures on his legs to straighten his legs, and they took about 6 hours each leg, and he would come back with his soccer shoes on and his shorts, never having done that before, and he would always come back and see us, which all the nurses got to like him, and he kind of
Right.
became our little mascot, or whatever you want to say. But there are other stories. That's just the one that would come to mind.
Do you still take a toy or give some sort of toy to each individual child? I know you do that.
We take lots of toys and coloring books and things like that. So each child gets a packet from us, usually a stuffed animal, crayons, pencils, paper, that kind of thing. So they get a packet when they come in to have their surgery, and then we usually give them something else after their surgery as well.
One of the things you told me that we've talked about on another show is how willing these kids are to have surgery, how they're not afraid. They seem very open to having.
Yeah, I think it's just that they're not exposed to doctors. In our country, if somebody walks in with a white coat on or a scrub suit, kids run the other way. But these kids will jump in your arms and walk down the hall with you to have their surgery, and there's no fear at all. And I think the biggest reason is they don't have ER on TV.
Right.
and they don't know that doctors are bad because they've never been to one. So they've never been to a doctor and had a shot or had somebody look in their ears. So the only thing they know is that they have been told that we're going to help make them better. And so there's this immediate trust. And it's so different. It's one of the other nice things about practicing medicine down there, is just that the perception of the doctor is different.
I was going to say the children that we operate on here, some of them are well prepared, but the majority of them aren't, and they come in screaming and squalling and
Right.
scared to death, and this has to be a very different thing for you.
It's very nice.
All right. If anyone were interested in making a donation to Kids First, how would they go about doing that?
They could either contact me at my office, or they could go on the website, which is kidsfirstortho.org.
Okay.
So either way.
Is it better to make a monetary donation or some other kind of donation?
I think that really depends on the person. We have Girl Scout troops from town who've given us boxes of stuffed animals and things. We welcome anything. It doesn't matter to us.
Now, how would they go about making a donation?
Well, you mean like a donation of toys?
A donation of anything. I mean, who would they contact to?
If they could just contact me from my office, or they could just go onto the website, either way.
Okay. Tell us about your website.
Our website was started by a guy named Ned Stone, who used to be a college student who came with us, and now he's an orthopedist. He's come full circle, so to speak, and he's very good at that kind of thing. He started, and then my daughter, who's a nonprofit consultant, spruced it up a couple years ago. And it has pictures of past trips and ways to contact us, like any typical website.
It's a really good website, I
think it is,
It tells everybody what you do, where you do it, and who's responsible. And, the pictures of the kids, that just is a draw right there.
Yeah.
All right. If you could sum up Kids First, what it means to you, how you're affected by it, what would you tell our audience?
That's a tough question. I would say that what Kids First means to me is that it's become a passion of mine over time. Kids First, I think sometimes sounds more dramatic than it is. All I'm doing in Kids First and all our team is doing is we're taking our talents and we're pooling them and we're giving them to someone else. And I think everybody has different talents. And Kids First to me is just my outlet for taking my talents and donating them to someone else, which gives me great satisfaction, as well as the team has been so close for so long. It's really fun to work with them. But I think it's no different than anyone else giving their talents. It just sounds a little more dramatic, and the bloody pictures make it look a little more dramatic.
I just think it's such a wonderful thing that you do. And you know, any of the medical people in this town that make these kinds of trips, I just think that they should be recognized for what they do.
Well, thank you.
And I do thank you for coming back and coming back and coming back and telling us about this program, because I think it's special.
Well, thank you. It's always my pleasure, and I love to talk about it, as you know.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you, Linda.
I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. In recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October, my next show will feature the Susan G. Komen For the Cure Breast Cancer Foundation. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful evening. Good